full overview of alerts and workflow and this concept of becoming data-driven. That'll take us about 18 or so minutes. That'll cover product functionality, licensing, and pricing. And then we'll jump into the product itself for a live product demo for a similar amount of time, about 18 or so minutes. And that should leave us with plenty of time at the end for Q&A. I do welcome questions as we go along, but we will kind of stack them up and save them to be answered at the end, just to ensure that we have enough time to get through today's content. And so, without further ado, let's get right to it. Now, talking about this concept of becoming data-driven, we really have to start out with your Sage 100 or your ERP system, because it contains a whole lot of data: invoices, payables, sales orders, inventory items, purchase orders, etc. And chances are that today you probably use some combination of reports, queries, and analytical tools in order to keep an eye on that information, to identify important, time-sensitive business conditions that need your attention and your response. And what we're talking about is actually moving to an environment whereby you actually enable your Sage 100 or ERP system to proactively monitor itself, to automatically look for critical, time-sensitive information, to be able to automatically deliver the needed information to the appropriate people, and even to automatically execute the appropriate response actions. What we're really talking about here is moving from the traditional yellow highlighter approach, and most of us can relate to that, having a report dumped on our desk, opening up our desk drawer, reaching for a yellow highlighter, then going through that report one page at a time to highlight just those items that require our attention. We're talking about moving to a data-driven approach where we no longer need that highlighter because our ERP system automatically recognizes and responds to those critical business conditions and activities. Now, another way to think about this concept of becoming more data-driven, ask yourself the following question. When was the last time in your daily business activities you felt like saying, if only we had known? If only we had known that this customer had so many past due invoices, we would have followed up with them. We would have resent them copies of their invoices. We would have put them on credit hold. We would have notified their account manager. If only we had known that we had certain leases or contracts that were about to expire, we would have renewed them and wouldn't be in this problematic situation that we're in. If only we had known about certain customers who had stopped buying from us or had changed their buying habits, we would have proactively reached out to them. It's scenarios like these that make you understand the importance of becoming data-driven. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, the tool behind a data-driven organization is Sage Alerts and Workflow. And the analogy that I like to use in talking about this technology is that it really is a smoke detector for your Sage 100, your Sage ERP data. We all know why we have smoke detectors in our homes. Well, we'd make the argument that you equally need a smoke detector to sit on top of and watch over your Sage ERP data. Now, Sage Alerts and Workflow was designed by Vineyard Soft Corporation. That's the company that I'm with. And today we have just over 12,000 organizations using this technology worldwide, which makes Sage Alerts and Workflow the most widely used technology of its kind on the market. Now, that 12,000 customers is a fine number, but quite honestly, I think the number beneath it is much more important. Sage Alerts and Workflow was designed to operate like a smoke detector in that you set it up, you tell it what conditions, what smoke signals to look for, you turn it on, and you walk away from it. It operates in a lights-out processing environment, and as a result of that, our support staff, and we do all frontline support on the product, we receive an average of just under 9 incoming new support tickets a day. That really speaks to the fact that the application is a set it and forget it type of solution. Most of our clients we don't hear from but once a year when they renew their annual maintenance and support. Down on the lower half of this slide, you can see a number of commendations and awards that Alerts and Workflow has been the recipient of. I'll touch base just on the very last one. Forbes, an organization who know a thing or two about business, They awarded the Alerts and Workflow Technology its commendation for top productivity enhancing tool. Now, just for a moment, I want to talk about a very common use of alerts and workflow with Sage 100 and, in fact, with all ERP solutions. And it's monitoring and automating many different aspects of the collections process, accounts receivable. Now, there's a statistic out there, you might be familiar with it. It's called Days Sales Outstanding, or DSO. And DSO measures the efficiency of your AR collections process. Basically, you want your DSO to be as low as possible because that reflects that as soon as customers are placing orders with you, you get paid for them on a very timely basis. Most importantly, Sage Alerts and Workflow helps an organization lower your DSO by automating the steps in the collections process, by making people, both your sales reps and customers, aware of overdue receivables, by preventing additional incremental orders being placed for past due customers and the like. Now, I'd like to drill down a little bit further into alerts and workflow to let you get a sense for exactly what it can do. First of all, like a smoke detector, it automatically monitors your Sage 100 data for any business conditions that are important to you. And that last statement bears repeating. Any business conditions that are important to you: overdue invoices, low stock, purchase orders awaiting approval, gross margin profit percentage too low. Out of the box, Alerts and Workflow ships with roughly 85 pre-configured business conditions for Sage 100. You can use those, you can customize them, and you can create an unlimited number of additional events, as they're called, of your own. Now, although we're going to focus our conversation today on what Alerts and Workflow can do for Sage 100, it's worth mentioning that Sage Alerts and Workflow is in fact an enterprise-wide monitoring and response technology. So if you're using other software solutions, such as a sales or CRM solution, a human resources application, customer service app, you can actually use Alerts and Workflow to monitor and respond to the data in those applications as well. Not only singly, but Alerts and Workflow can look for conditions between Sage 100 and your other applications, and Alerts and Workflow can even optionally monitor the content of incoming email. Now, as its name implies, the most common use of Sage Alerts and Workflow is indeed to send alerts. And the single most common alert that Sage Alerts and Workflow sends for Sage 100 clients is alerts about current business activities, orders placed today, sending out order confirmations, shipment confirmations. Here we have an example of an alert that is sent out via web browser. We actually call this webcasting within Alerts and Workflow. And this is one of the business snapshots that comes with the product. And to me, this is kind of cool because it's actually 3 different alerts being displayed on just one window. Up at the top, a list of monthly sales totals by customer. In the middle, a list of those products that are not selling well this month. And at the very bottom, simply a listing of those sales orders that were placed today. Now, most people think email when you think about alerts, and as we'll see in just a moment or two, Alerts and Workflow does indeed send alerts via email as well. But it's important to note that sometimes it's just handy to have information that pops up right in front of you, allowing you to see what's going on without having to open email, wade through spam, etc. So the methods by which Alerts and Workflow can deliver these notifications are listed on the current slide. As I mentioned, email is in fact still the most common alert delivery method, but text messaging to a cell phone, popping up information on screen or in a web browser, even sending alerts via fax, all of these alert delivery methods come with Alerts and Workflow. Now, a couple moments ago, I alluded to sending out an order confirmation as one of the most common uses of Alerts and Workflow. And in fact, whether it's an order confirmation, an invoice, a statement, a dunning notice, picking list, purchase order, all of your standard forms and documents in Sage 100 can be automatically generated and delivered by Alerts and Workflow. And whether those are delivered in plain text, HTML, as a PDF document, all of those choices are available to you. Now, when an alert gets delivered, sometimes a simple, short little heads-up message isn't sufficient. What you actually need to deliver is something a bit more comprehensive, a bit more analytical. And so it's important that alerts and workflow has the ability to automatically generate and deliver analytical reports as a part of its alerts. Now, up at the very top left of the slide, you'll see reference to both scheduled and triggered reports. And I just want to take a moment to talk about that. A scheduled report, as you can imagine, might be a weekly AR aging report or a daily or even hourly stock status report. But a triggered report to me is actually almost more interesting than that, because a triggered report is your ability to tell alerts and workflow to generate certain reports only when the business conditions warrant it. For example, you could say to alerts and workflow, if and when any of my clients get to a collections condition of more than $5,000 over 90 days past due, then and only then do I want to generate an AR aging report for that particular client and automatically deliver that report to that client's sales rep. That's an example of a triggered report. Finally, when it comes to the area of generating and delivering alerts in different shapes and sizes and formats, certainly sometimes a picture is really worth 1,000 words. So embedded within alerts and workflow is its ability to generate graphic alerts, bar charts, pie charts, line charts, etc. I mentioned earlier that alerts and workflow can send out an alert when a customer has changed their buying habits. They all of a sudden have dropped the quantity that they're buying from you. Well, yeah, you could deliver that information in a multi-page text-heavy report, or you could just send the corresponding salesperson a nice looking line chart that says, here's this customer's sales over the last 6, 9, or 12 months. Please follow up with them and find out why they have dropped their purchasing from us. Now, so far we've talked all about triggering and generating alerts, forms, documents, when an event's conditions are met. That's the alert side of Sage Alerts and Workflow. Now we finally come to the workflow side. And it's very important to note that Alerts and Workflow has the ability to go back into Sage 100 and actually add or update records. If, for example, a client has gotten severely past due in Sage 100, let's have Sage Alerts and Workflow put that customer on credit hold. And if, in fact, a customer is placed on credit hold in Sage 100, the best thing to do next might be to have Alerts and Workflow schedule an activity, such as a scheduled phone call in the corresponding sales or CRM application for the appropriate account manager to make to that client to try and resolve that credit hold situation. Once we jump into the application, you'll see a number of different ways that Alerts and Workflow can actually go back into your business applications and add or update data. So within your Sage ERP system, there's just a heck of a lot of data, heck of a lot of potential conditions, thresholds, activities, even inactivity that requires your attention. Sage Alerts and Workflow is that data-driven technology that recognizes those conditions, those thresholds, those exceptions, and automatically executes the appropriate responses, which can be any combination of the delivery of alerts, forms, documents, reports, and charts, and the execution of application workflow to update data where required. So, I mentioned that out of the box, Sage Alerts and Workflow ships with roughly 85 pre-configured business conditions. That's true, but that's just one of roughly 75 collections of pre-configured events that we offer for free as add-ons to Alerts and Workflow. If, for example, you might be using Sage's CRM application or HR application, we have event packs for those products too, as we also have for over 70 other different front office and back office applications, including applications that are not from Sage software. So we welcome you to have a look at those. Now, just to spend a moment talking about a client who implemented Alerts and Workflow, Toyo Inc., a multinational manufacturer of ink for printing presses. Their big focus was indeed on collections and automating the collections process. Just A little over 6 months after implementing alerts and workflow, Toyo Inc. came to us and said, we just passed over 20,000 alert messages sent to our customers. And we said, wow, did you mean to send that many? And they said, yeah, we sure did. We're sending out all of our invoices, all of our statements through alerts and workflow. We're notifying all of our staff by alerts and workflow. And what was most important, I think, impressive about Toyo Inc. was their return on investment statistics, because they analyzed the results of implementing alerts and workflow. They were able to quantify a staff savings of over 100 person hours every month saved. And as an additional bonus, they saw their average monthly AR collections increase by roughly $11,000. In their words, Sage Alerts and Workflow actually did the work of 1 to 2 full-time employees. Now, before I show you the application itself, certainly it's important to know how it's licensed and priced, so I'll just take a couple of moments to do that. Sage Alerts and Workflow is not licensed per user. It doesn't matter how many Sage 100 users you have within your organization, how many people you wish to notify or anything like that. Let me start off up at the top of this slide. Sage Alerts and Workflow is licensed according to the number of applications you wish it to monitor. So let's make this very easy. Let's say that you want to use Sage Alerts and Workflow to monitor your Sage 100, your Sage ERP application. You want to monitor it for an unlimited number of business conditions. You want the ability to trigger alerts to an unlimited number of recipients, not only your own staff, your clients, your vendors, suppliers. You want those alerts to be delivered via any possible delivery method, email, text message, web dashboard, etc. You want those alerts to include forms, documents, reports, charts, and graphs, and you want the ability to have alerts and workflow go back into your applications and actually add or update information where appropriate. For that suite of functionality, you're looking at a one-time purchase price of just under $3,300, $3,295. Again, that is a one-time cost. You'd then be looking at an additional annual maintenance and support cost of roughly 20% or $650 per year. There are just 3 options for you to consider on top of that. And those options allow you to use alerts and workflow to monitor the data that is in other applications. For example, maybe you have the Sage CRM application. You'd like to use alerts and workflow to monitor it as well. To do so would be an additional $1,799 for monitoring an additional application. For monitoring 2 additional applications, it's twice that. And if you spend an additional 3 times that, or just under $5,400, you get what's called the unlimited connection version of alerts and workflow, enabling you to monitor every single business application that you own today or ever will own. Now, a couple key points I wish to make about Sage 100. People often ask me, well, when you say monitoring Sage 100, does that mean all of the modules, AR, AP, inventory, etc.? Answer, yes. Second question that we get is, well, what if we're in a multi-company environment in Sage 100? Does that $3,295 cover all of our companies? Once again, the answer is yes. Now, a few years back, we surveyed roughly 1,100 of our customers to try and get a sense for how they were using alerts and workflow and how quickly they were able to pay off their investment in alerts and workflow. And it turned out that the average payback period or return on investment was just under 3 months at 88 days. And by the way, that ROI calculator is available to you from our website in case you'd like to plug in your own numbers and see how quickly you could realize a return on investment as well. So with that, you've got a textual, a verbal description of what alerts and workflow can do. So now let me show you that solution. So I'm going to jump into Sage Alerts and Workflow. And I'd like to start out with a couple of general words about the technology. First of all, Alerts and Workflow is a server-based application. It is typically installed on just one machine within your IT environment. Alerts and Workflow does not need a dedicated server. You could put it on your Sage 100 server, on your SQL server or Exchange server, or for that matter, even run it on a workstation, which is what I'm demoing it to you from today. Alerts and Workflow runs under any Windows-based operating system, which makes that a mercifully brief conversation. And Alerts and Workflow stores its own data in a choice of 3 different database formats. Microsoft SQL Server is our preferred and most common database format, but you can also host Alerts and Workflow under both SQL Express or even Microsoft Access. And some folks ask us, well, why Access if you already support the other 2 database types? Our answer is to make it easy for you to download and try out Alerts and Workflow yourself. So you don't have to bother your database administrator. You can download a trial version of Alerts and Workflow. All of the functionality is enabled, and it stores its data in a collection of Microsoft Access databases. If you do choose to move ahead with Alerts and Workflow, there's one-click migration to either SQL Express or full SQL Server. Now, the way Alerts and Workflow works, once again, I'm going to go back to that analogy of a smoke detector, is you pointed out the various applications or modules that you wish it to monitor. You tell it about the particular conditions that you want it to check for. You tell Alerts and Workflow how often to monitor for those different conditions. Obviously, different conditions will have different frequencies of monitoring. And then you turn Alerts and Workflow on. It runs as a Windows service in the background. Once again, set it and forget it. Now, before I take you through the configuration of a sample event, I just want to talk about a couple of the items that you see here. I mentioned that one of the alert delivery methods in Alerts and Workflow is via web dashboard. And here those dashboards are represented in a group called ERP dashboards. Now, these are just about 12.5 or so dashboards that ship with the product. You can use these, customize these, and create an unlimited number of additional web dashboards of your own. Again, no additional technology is required. These events, as we call them, will dynamically create and dynamically update web pages with the details of the corresponding alerts within them. If you do happen to be using also a CRM or sales application, such as Sage CRM, it's an important capability in Alerts and Workflow that it can monitor conditions between Sage 100 and a corresponding CRM application, such as Sage CRM or even any other CRM solution. And just going a little bit further down on our list here, you can see we've got branches for monitoring just CRM data, branches for monitoring just human resource data, etc. I did mention that out of the box, Alerts and Workflow ships with roughly 85 pre-configured conditions for Sage 100. And just to give you an idea of what some of those are, just in the area of monitoring accounts receivable and collections processes, you can see a long list of business conditions that can be monitored for, from looking at customer client balances, aged receivables, accounts that have been put on hold, taken off of hold, changes to a customer's credit limit or credit status, or even looking at the status of invoices, coming due or overdue. So again, those are just some of the 85 pre-configured conditions that ship with Alerts and Workflow. Now let's take a look at one particular condition. So let's take a look at, sadly, an all too often situation that businesses find themselves in today, having to institute some type of collections process from their customers. As long as customers get sent invoices, there will be some customers who are delinquent in paying for those invoices. So let's take a look at what Alerts and Workflow can do to address that. So we've expanded our event called invoices that are overdue. Every event has up to 5 components. The first of those components is telling me whether we are currently checking for this condition. Is it active? And secondly, on what recurring basis or frequency are we checking for this particular event's conditions? In this case, we're checking for this event's conditions every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, those business conditions that are very time sensitive, maybe monitoring inventory levels, you might need to check more frequently, such as every few hours, once an hour, every 30 minutes, every 5 minutes, or even continuously. All of those frequencies are available to you. Interesting to note also, although this event says it runs every day at 9 o'clock in the morning, I happen to know that that's not entirely true. It actually only runs Monday through Fridays at 9 o'clock in the morning, because if there's not going to be anyone in the office on Saturdays or Sundays, there's probably no reason for me to trigger alerts on those days. You can specify what work days and work hours are. You can actually set up your own holiday calendar, again, making sure that alerts get sent only when there are going to be people to respond to them. Now, the second component of an event is its query or triggering criteria. This event is looking for invoices that are overdue and have a balance in excess of a certain dollar amount. For this particular event, we're triggering on $100, and if we are so authorized to modify that triggering threshold, we can come in here and change it appropriately, $200, $500, $1,000 or more. Now, whenever I start talking about the triggering mechanism behind an event, the query, I always get a question from folks, which is the following. How easy is it for me to actually create or modify a query? For example, we might have certain customers that we wish to exclude from this event's criteria. So let me take you into the query designer, because the answer to that question is you don't have to be a programmer. You're not writing any kind of SQL syntax or programming code, but you do need to be familiar with an application's database schema. In plain English, you need to know what data sits where. If you've ever written a report for Sage 100, you have the required expertise. And if you don't, not to worry, because the good folks at Martin and Associates absolutely have that knowledge for you, and probably in their sleep as well. Alerts and Workflow will show you a list of all of the files or tables. In this case, in your Sage 100 system, you can pick and choose what tables you want to retrieve data from. You can see here among the tables we've chosen is our open invoice table. You can pick and choose what individual fields of information you want to retrieve data from. If I'm going to send someone an alert about an overdue invoice, I probably want to send them information that includes the invoice number, its date, its due date, the balance of the invoice, etc. And here, Alerts and Workflow allows you to get much more sophisticated. If, for example, you wanted to total up all of the overdue invoices per client, if you wanted to calculate the average overdue invoice per client, those more advanced functions are available in plain English from a drop-down list. We even include a calculation wizard, so if you wanted to, for example, calculate the number of days overdue that an individual invoice is, Alerts and Workflow allows you to do that, once again, without any programming required. I'm going to jump ahead 2 more tabs to the Filters tab, because this is where we're able to specify the conditions that we want Alerts and Workflow to look for. In the case of invoices that are overdue and have a balance in excess of X dollars, we're really looking for just 2 conditions. First of all, we want to make sure that the invoice is not fully paid, that it actually has a balance. So here we're specifying that the balance is greater than a certain amount. Once again, all of your conditions, criteria are available to you in plain English format from drop-down lists. Our second criteria is looking at an invoice's due date. We want to look at only those invoices that are past due. Therefore, that due date has to be less than the current date. Everything here is available to you in this wizard format. You can specify Boolean logic, ands and ors. You can get very, very sophisticated. Also, a very important capability of Alerts and Workflow is its ability to audit any field in your Sage ERP system. So for example, if I'm concerned that someone is mucking around with an invoice's due date, I can tell Alerts and Workflow to begin auditing the value in that field, and Alerts and Workflow will automatically capture the old and new value of any field you want it to audit. Okay. Now, just in case we have any technical people on the phone with us today, and you might wonder, well, I wonder what Alerts and Workflow is doing behind the scenes. Well, I'll show you. It's executing a rather sophisticated SQL select statement. And the reason I'm showing you all this lovely SQL syntax in blue is to point out that this is what you don't have to know what to do. Alerts and Workflow automatically creates all this lovely SQL code for you automatically based upon the selections that you made in the preceding tabs. We can even test the results of our query. Let's see if we have any unpaid invoices with a balance in excess of $2,000. And in fact, we do. We can see our invoice due date from all back in 2010, very past due. And we can check out our balance In fact, all over $2,000. So our query is working as intended. So, having looked at the query, now what do we want the event to do if and when those conditions occur? Well, first and foremost, we wanted to tell someone about those conditions. We wanted to send out alerts. Maybe a quick heads up text message, maybe sending the overdue invoice to the customer, maybe even generating some other content to be delivered. So as you can see here, all of this content is listed within this deliverables tab or branch. Let's take a look at one of the alerts, such as the instant message alert, and let's go and not only look at it, but edit it and modify it. So here, our instant message alert reads, this particular invoice, and we'll show the invoice number for this particular customer, has a balance of X dollars and was due on such and such a due date. That looks pretty good. What I do see, however, is missing is the original date of the invoice. So let's just add that right here and say dated. And let's look for our invoice date field. There it is. Let's drop it right into our message, add a blank space to make it easy to read. And just like that, we've modified the alert message. Now, the alert message can be sent in a number of different formats, including web dashboard, etc. Of course, the most common alert delivery method still today is email. And Alerts and Workflow can send out those alerts via plain text or, as you can see here, in HTML format. And folks see this and say, well, does that mean I have to know how to write HTML syntax? And the answer is a very enthusiastic, no, you don't. Because Alerts and Workflow ships with a library of HTML templates to choose from. You simply choose the template and then drop in the corresponding fields you want to appear in that alert message. Now, if we look back at our list of deliverables for this event, we can also see that we're actually having our invoice form automatically generated. It makes sense. If an invoice is overdue for payment, the best thing that we can do is regenerate that invoice and send it once again to the corresponding client. So if we go to our Reports tab for this event, we can see here is our invoice form right out of Crystal Reports. And that invoice form is being generated in PDF format. You could also choose other formats such as MS Word, Excel, and HTML. By the way, I do want to mention, I've talked about how Alerts and Workflow can generate Crystal reports and forms and documents. It can also generate reports that were designed using Sage Intelligence as well as Sage Enterprise Intelligence. Now, the second item that you see on the Reports tab here is actually a different kind of report. In fact, it's a chart. Let's have ourselves a look at this chart. This chart is showing us the overdue total invoices per sales rep. So it's going to show us which of our sales reps are doing the best and worst job in terms of collecting overdue invoices from their clients. So let's go into this chart. Again, the chart design tool, which is what we're looking at here, comes as a part of Alerts and Workflow, nothing additional for you to purchase or configure. If we jump down to actually take a look at what this chart looks like when it's generated, we can see that we've got 4 sales reps who have customers with overdue invoices, and it's pretty clear Shelley seems to be the winner in terms of doing the worst job for collecting overdue invoices from her customers. Charts and graphs like this one can be embedded within email alerts, can be attached to emails, can be posted to web pages. So a number of different ways these graphic alerts can also be delivered. We can see here also the very last item in our list of deliverables is actually a Microsoft Word document. This is a document that shows customers how to pay for their invoices using an online bill payment method. So, deliverables are all of the content that an alert can deliver. The next logical step is to look at whom we want that content, those alerts, to be delivered to. Any alert recipient is referred to as a subscriber, and this event has 4. The first 2 are what we call standard subscribers, because we're actually identifying the name of the group and/or the name of the person or people we want Alerts and Workflow to notify. Now, please note, your Sage 100, your ERP system already has tables with customers' names, email addresses, cell phone numbers, etc. Do you have to re-enter those into Alerts and Workflow? Absolutely not. all of that information is instantly accessible by alerts and workflow dynamically out of your ERP system. Now, you can also additionally define groups and users. So, in fact, I'm notifying everyone in my finance group, and I'm notifying them via email and fax and instant message. I sometimes like to joke about alerts and workflow. You can really annoy the heck out of someone if you put your mind to it. I'm notifying myself via just two methods, email and IM, and I just want to take a note here to point out something. In my case, if I receive an alert Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., I receive that alert at my work or VineyardSoft email address. But if that email alert needs to get delivered on Saturdays, on Sundays, before or after work hours, I've actually told alerts and workflow to notify me at a secondary email address, which in my case is a Gmail address. When you think about this particular event, invoices that are overdue, truly, the two most important people to notify are the customer and the customer's sales rep or account manager. And that's what these last two recipients or subscribers are. They're referred to as dynamic recipients because naturally they're going to change based upon which invoices are overdue for payment. And that brings us to the final component of an event, its workflow actions. Now, an important note about this branch. Because this branch allows an event to write data back into a database to update Sage 100 or to update a CRM application, this branch is covered under a secondary layer of security. Not only must a person be authorized for access to alerts and workflow, they must be specially authorized for access to this branch. Why? Because when it comes to writing data back into a database, you need to be darn sure that the people who are setting that up have the requisite authorization and ability. In this particular event's case, I have 4 different actions being executed, everything from creating an export file. Maybe I'm working with a collections agency, and at the end of every week, they want me to send them a CSV, a comma-separated file of all customer invoices that are past due. But these various workflow tools are really a combination of some wizard-driven tools and other programming tools, such as a fully embedded visual basic scripting engine. You can do such things as call COM objects or DLLs. And being added to the workflow actions branch in our version 10 release due out in the Q4 of this year is integration and the ability to call web services. You know, since I've mentioned our V10 product, which is coming out at the end of this year, I do also want to mention that although the user interface that you're looking at right now is a Windows user interface, our V10 release will also offer the complete application available under a web-based user interface as well. So as a V10, we'll offer both. Okay, just a couple last things I'd like to touch upon in the application, really just one, and that is to give you a sense for just how sophisticated alerts and workflow can get in terms of identifying and responding to different business conditions. Here I want to show you a trend analysis event. This event, when active, is scheduled to run on the first day of every month. And here's what it does. It starts out by looking and totaling what each customer purchased for the month just ended. Then this event goes 6 months back for each customer to figure out what each customer's average monthly purchases is based upon that 6 months of history. And lastly, this event compares for each customer what they purchased for the month just ended versus the customer's average monthly purchases. And if any customer's purchases for the month just ended represents a drop of at least 30%, then what this event is doing is it's sending an alert message to the corresponding sales rep to say, hey, you've got a customer who's changed their buying habits. And here is that alert message. Hello, salesperson. This customer of yours has placed orders for the previous month to date that represents a drop of at least 30% over their average month. And we're showing just 4 fields of data for each customer, what they purchased for the month just ended, what their average monthly purchases is, and then the decrease. The decrease represented both as a dollar amount and as a percentage. Just how valuable is this for a salesperson to come to their desk the first day of a month, and have waiting for them a list of their customers who have significantly changed their buying habits. Okay, so with that, let me jump back into the presentation. I just have a couple of last slides I'd like to share with you. So, although we have been focusing on what alerts and workflow can do with Sage 100, your ERP solution, it's really important to note that this is truly an enterprise-wide technology. So not just integrating with your ERP solution, but with your add-ons to your ERP solutions. Do you have sales tax computation software, document management software, etc.? Alerts and workflow can integrate with those applications, those solutions as well. In fact, alerts and workflow can read any data that sits in a relational database. So whether it's SQL, Oracle, Sybase, Informix, Access, FoxPro, the list goes on. Alerts and workflow can also integrate with solutions outside of the Sage world, whether they're from other vendors or even homegrown solutions. And don't forget that alerts and workflow also has the ability to monitor the content of incoming email messages. So, with all of that information, what's the best way for you to proceed to figure out if, in fact, alerts and workflow can help your organization and where and how it can help your organization? Well, a good way to start is simply by answering the following 7 questions. First of all, in your business, do you have a lot of date-sensitive data that you need to keep on top of? Due dates, delivery dates, discount expiration dates, and the like. Do you have certain business thresholds that if they're approached or exceeded, they need to trigger certain actions, certain responses, such as if and when a customer gets to within 10% of their credit limit, you need to notify them, their sales rep, and maybe you even need to put them on credit hold. Do you have certain business activities that should happen, but sometimes don't? It's been more than 30 days and you haven't received an order from a repeat customer who typically buys every month from you. Or perhaps has it been more than 30, 45, or 60 days since certain items in inventory have been sold? Does your organization, as a rule, tend to rely upon or look to exception management to focus attention not on everything that's going right within your organization, but just on the few things that are going wrong? Do you utilize trend analysis to identify changing trends in purchasing and the like? Do you need to know when certain critical information in your Sage ERP system has changed, such as an item's MSRP being changed, a customer's credit limit or credit status being changed, etc.? And finally, do you have one or more manually intensive, repetitive processes that could and really should be automated? Specifically, these are often around areas such as collections, the generation and delivery of invoices and statements, but also just in everyday business processes such as order confirmations, shipment confirmations, the generation and delivery of purchase orders, and the like. And then, in addition to answering these 7 questions, what you can do beyond that is visit the Alerts and Workflow website. You can see the URL up at the top of this slide, simply alertsandworkflow.com, all spelled out. And kind of towards the lower middle of this homepage, you'll see a question that reads, does your organization need alerts and workflow? Click here to find out. This will take you into the Alerts and Workflow Needs Assessment tool. It's completely free, and it takes roughly 7 minutes to go through from start to finish. And you can even go through it multiple times. The purpose of this needs assessment tool is to allow you to kind of self-analyze your business processes, your current degree of automation, to basically allow alerts and workflow to identify which parts of your organization might most benefit from the implementation of the alerts and workflow solution. After you spend the 7 or so minutes answering these questions, what you're presented with is a report card. And that report card shows you on the left-hand side the capabilities of alerts and workflow, and then going over to the right, based upon the answers that you've provided to these questions, it'll show you, do you need alerts and workflow? And if so, just how urgently do you need it? Do you need it a lot or just a little? So again, feel free to go through that needs assessment tool. You can go through it multiple times and really get a sense for where and what aspects of your organization, which processes within your business could most benefit from the addition of a data-driven tool like Sage Alerts and Workflow. And so, as promised, I want to leave somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes at the end of our time together to answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to turn back to my colleagues over at Martin and Associates. Rick, do we have any questions that have come in from anyone?
We just have one. One was related to basically how long does it take, a typical implementation of alerts and workflow, what general time frame?
Excellent. Good question. Thank you for asking that from whoever sent that in to us. Like any implementation, the first part of the answer certainly has to be, well, it depends. But let me give you an idea. Of course, it does depend based upon exactly what you want alerts and workflow to do for your organization, but most organizations who implement alerts and workflow start out initially by setting it up to monitor a number of business conditions and trigger alerts to the appropriate people. Yes, it can do a whole lot more than that, generating forms and documents, analytical reports, charts and graphs, executing workflow, but I'm a big believer in walk before you run. So let's take an example of setting up alerts and workflow to monitor, let's say, somewhere between 6 and 12 typical business conditions and triggering email alerts to a number of people within and outside of your organization. So if we take that as kind of a typical first step setup of alerts and workflow, to get that installed and running in a production environment, you're looking at somewhere around 4 to at most 8 hours, half a day to a day of configuration work. It's a pretty quick and easy application to set up. It actually uses the standard Windows installation. So during the install process, the only thing that you're prompted to specify is where you want the application to be installed. And then it's a matter of pointing alerts and workflow at your Sage ERP application, and then starting to look at those 85 pre-configured business conditions, seeing if you want to use any of the ones that are there, customizing them to your organization-specific requirements, and if appropriate, creating additional queries and events of your own. But I think if you go with that general idea, setting up 6 to 12 email alerts, you'd be looking at no more than that 4 to 8 hours of time required to get that up and running.
All right, yeah, good. That sounds pretty straightforward there. There was one additional question here. Does Sage Alerts and Workflow work with TigerPaw software? And if it does, what if you only need to track 1 or 2, 2 or 3 alerts?
Right. Well, my answer to the first question is going to be the very honest, I don't know, because I'm not familiar with TigerPaw software, But having said that, if TigerPaw software stores their data in a relational database, like, for example, a SQL database, a ProvideX database like Sage 100, or any other kind of relational database, then the answer is going to be yes. Yes, it can and will work with that application. The second part of the question was, well, what if we only have 2 or 3 events that we want to monitor within TigerPaw? The answer there is it actually doesn't matter the number of events, because the way alerts and workflow is licensed, as you might recall from earlier, is simply based upon the number of applications that it's monitoring. There are a heck of a lot of clients out there that are using alerts and workflow to only look for 2 or 3 business conditions. In most cases, it's typically that those business conditions happen really often, like we're looking for newly placed sales orders, or we're looking for invoices that are coming due. So although you might only have 2 or 3 active events, those events could easily be triggering alerts numbering in the hundreds or even thousands. So it does not matter the number of alerts or scenarios that you wish to monitor. the licensing and pricing of the product is strictly based on the number of applications that you wish it to monitor. So in your case, you would be looking at a 2-connection license, one connection for monitoring Sage 100 and a second connection for monitoring the Tiger Paw application. But you know, it also occurs to me I want to share 2 other items that are connected with this conversation. One is I mentioned that the software is available for free trial. And that free trial is not only the live shipping software, but it comes with unlimited connections. So for the person who asked the question about Tiger Paw, I say go ahead and try it out. When you download the trial version of Alerts and Workflow, you'll be able to try tying it into Tiger Paw as well as tying it into Sage 100. So that's one of the good things about the trial software. It's for unlimited connections. And the second item that I wanted to share is since most people in the Sage 100 world are using the version of Sage 100 that stores its data in a ProvideX database format, we've been familiar with that database for well over a decade. We understand its strengths and some of its areas of, well, shall we say, not so much strength. We recognize that there are some limitations to that database, and what we've done is we have built a database optimization tool. We actually built it initially specifically because of ProvideX, although it can be used with other databases as well. But what I want to share with you is that it does optimize and streamline the analysis and extraction of data from your Sage 100 database. And that's very important because there are some limitations in terms of the native ProvideX functionality. We're aware of them. We've built this little data optimization tool to surmount those limitations. And that tool comes as part of Alerts and Workflow at no additional cost. So just for any of you who ever had to, for example, wait perhaps a somewhat longer time for certain reports or analyses to complete for Sage 100, we've surmounted that challenge.
All right. Thanks for that answer, Don. So I don't really have anything in the chat. If anybody wanted to add that, or you can scroll and mouse over the bottom of your screen, and you could unmute if you'd like.
And you know, Rick, I'm just going to pop in because I did notice on my personal chat there was one additional question, and I may have already partially answered it. The question was in regards to, I think it was in regards to Sage Intelligence. Let me just double check again. Yes. So a question came in about Sage Intelligence. Is it considered an additional application? Pardon me. And that's a great question, and I'm very happy to give the answer. It is not considered an additional application. I talked about how Sage Alerts and Workflow can actually dynamically trigger and generate Sage Intelligence as well as Sage Enterprise Intelligence reports. It can do that out of the box. It is at no additional cost, so it does not require an additional application. What's really cool about that, too, is that Sage Alerts and Workflow can take your Sage Intelligence or SEI reports and trigger them both on a scheduled basis. So if you simply have certain intelligence reports that you want to get generated daily, weekly, monthly, Alerts and Workflow can do that. But again, even cooler in my estimation is that you can have Alerts and Workflow generate and deliver intelligence reports as a result of certain business conditions occurring in your Sage 100 database. And just one last note about that integration. We have both a data sheet on that integration as well as a little mini manual. I think it's about 18 or so pages long that actually detailed the integration steps to get Sage Intelligence or Enterprise Intelligence working with Sage 100 and Sage Alerts and Workflow. So if you want to follow up, find some more information on that, just ping either myself or any of the folks at Martin Associates, and we'll get that additional information to you. Okay, Rick, back to you.
Yeah. So I guess I don't have any other questions here on the chat. So if there's any others or anybody wants to unmute.
Well, Rick, it's a lot of information pushed
Yeah.
forward to people, so I kind of understand when people don't have too many questions, but you have all of our contact information. Go to the website, definitely go through that needs assessment tool, download the product, give it a try. If you run into any questions as you're taking a look at it, we are here to assist. So thank you all very much, and I'll turn it to Rick for final comments.
Yep. Thanks a lot. And Don, great presentation, and very easy to follow and everything. So I'm sure everybody got some good knowledge out of that. So again, the folks on the line, if you want to follow up with myself or your account manager or Betsy in our office with any questions, just let us know. And I guess I will wrap it up. We will be following up with some emails on the folks that attended here and just reminding them of some of those tools that you mentioned, Don, the ROI calculator, et cetera. So, but other than that, I guess I thank everybody for joining in today.
Thanks very much, Rick. Have a great afternoon.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.